Hello and welcome to the Rugby World Cup 2019 draw fair. So World Rugby drew the draw last night, I think it was, sometime in New Zealand time anyway, and we now know what the fixtures are going to be for the Rugby World Cup in 2019. A whole bunch of people have said, oh, it's too early, it's still 2 years away, why are they doing it now? But I understand it because a lot of teams have got to organise themselves, figure out all their logistics, where they're staying and where they're going to train, and all of those sort of things. One of the pieces I've done before is about why do we have home advantage. I think part of that is because players are such routine animals that they get used to, that they feel much more comfortable and play much more better when they know what's going on and when they're in a comfortable environment. And so that will be part of this. Will be how do the top teams, especially who have the time and resources to look into this, will be looking into how they can actually make this as comfortable as normal for their teams. You can already see that Australia are going to play Japan this year in 2017. You've got Australia and New Zealand talking about having the third Bledisloe Cup game in Japan in 2018, so that all their players are more comfortable with being in Japan and aware of it. So I do understand why it is 2 years out. So anyway, the World Rugby Chief Executive Brett Gosper has been quoted as saying, "We have worked hard to deliver a match schedule that improves on the Rugby World Cup 2015 model, delivering a more balanced spread of matches across the 4 weeks of pool matches and greater rest periods for the emerging rugby nations ahead of matches against the top-ranked teams. These are the foundations that will assist the world's top players to perform to their best in Japan." Now, I did write an article saying, was the World Cup 2015 draw a handicap for the Tier 2 nations? And my conclusion was, yes, it was, because of the short turnarounds, the 4 and 5 day turnarounds. And that's one that really hurt teams in 2015. You could see this, especially in Japan, who had to play Scotland, I think it was 4 days after playing South Africa. They beat South Africa, they were competitive with Scotland until just after half time, at which point their bench strength and their fitness just gave out and Scotland ran away with it. So yes, those 4 day turnarounds are important, and especially when they are up against the top ranked teams. So let's see how it compares to 2015. So in 2015, as I say, there was a situation where Japan had South Africa and then Scotland. Also Tonga, Fiji and Canada all had 2 short turnarounds, like turnarounds of 4 or 5 days. And it's no surprise that this was the first Rugby World Cup where a Pacific Island team didn't finish in the top 3 of a pool, because Tonga and Fiji really had a hard task made impossible with those short turnarounds. And so none of the Pacific Islands automatically qualified for the Rugby World Cup 2019, and World Rugby had to change the qualification criteria to make it possible for all 3 to qualify this time around. That's the kind of thing that this leads to. So if we look at last time out, the Tier 1 teams had 5 4 day turnarounds and 2 5 day turnarounds, with an average duration of their pool games of 20 days. In 2019 they'll have 8 4 day turnarounds and 1 5 day turnaround, with 20, again the average duration of all their games. So for Tier 1 it looks like it's getting worse. If we look at Tier 2, they had 5 4 day turnarounds and 7 5 day turnarounds, with an average duration of 19 at the 2015 World Cup. But at the 2019 World Cup, they had 5 4 day turnarounds and 2 5 day turnarounds. So, yes, things have been made better for the Tier 2 countries. The other thing is, if we actually look at the details of those games, apart from one game, all those Tier 1 turnarounds are against the 4th or 5th seed in the pool. So you'd think they're going to win that game anyway. So having a short turnaround and the depth that Tier 1 teams have shouldn't be a problem for them. And then when we look at for the Tier 2 sides, it's a pretty similar thing again, where the games are against the 4th and 5th seeds in the pools. So yes, again, they've got the easier games hanging up there. 2 of the hardest turnarounds looks to be perhaps America's 2, which will probably be either Canada or Uruguay, who we have to play Fiji, who are the 4th seed, and then Georgia, who are the 3rd seed, 4 days later. and then also the weakest team in the competition, who are the repechage people, who will have to play Scotland, followed by Japan 5 days later. So those are probably the two hardest turnarounds, two teams that got the hardest turnarounds in there, and Japan are on the easiest end of two short turnarounds, so a bit of home advantage going on there. One of those short turnarounds is actually Scotland, funnily enough. So obviously in 2015 Japan played South Africa and then Scotland. This time round Scotland will have to play Europe 1 4 days after, and then play Japan 4 days after that. So that's the one exception for a Tier 1 side not playing the 4th or 5th seed in the pool. Scotland get to play the Tier 3. So it sounds like maybe it's a bit of coincidence, but it sounds a bit like payback for Scotland to me. They're from Japan, who are going to have Scotland having to play that Europe 1 team, probably Romania, and then play Japan 4 days later. So yes, it does look like it has been made easier from that point of view, and we should have more competitive games. Whilst we're talking about home advantage, Japan have got the longest duration at 23 days, which is longer than anyone had in 2015, and it's 2 days longer than anyone has in 2019. Also, Japan are the only side with no turnarounds less than 7 days, whereas 3 sides got that in 2015. So clearly it looks like Japan have been given the easiest draw out of all the teams, which is part of kind of what you'd expect for the home nation in this. And World Rugby clearly wants Japan to do as well as they can, because obviously that'll help build atmosphere around the tournament and interest in the tournament while we're there. So yes, it is much fairer than the 2015. So well done, World Rugby. There are still some anomalies though. Europe 1 and Fiji, so Romania and Fiji, will have played 2 games before the repechage winner and USA even kick off for their first games, for example. But there's going to have to be compromises somewhere. It's not a perfect world by any stretch. And if you go and have a look on Reddit, there's a very good diagram on there. By the way, I've written all this up on my blog, DrivingMaul.com. So if you want to read it rather than listen to it, you could obviously go there. A bit late now. But there's a good diagram on Reddit looking at all of these things. And yes, they have made it so that the Tier 2 teams, don't have to play a Tier 1 team after a short turnaround. But it does also mean that some teams are going to find it pretty tough. If you think that someone like Georgia, they're in their pool with Australia, Wales, Fiji, and America's 2, which would be either Canada or Uruguay, their main goal is going to be to finish third again in the pool behind Wales and Australia. So they're going to look at beating Fiji and America's 2. And yet they're going to have those 2 games with only a 3-day turnaround. So they're going to place the Americas 2 and then a 4-day turnaround, a 3-day gap before they play Fiji on a 4-day turnaround. So that's going to be really tough for them. America's 2, similar, will be playing Fiji and then Georgia in a short period of time as well. So for some of the Tier 2 teams who are perhaps the games they care about are going to be the Tier 2 against other Tier 2 teams, there are definitely teams that have got a harder draw than others there. But the idea is to make all the games as competitive as possible, and hence that's why they want to have the bigger gaps for the Tier 2 teams before they play a Tier 1 team, so we don't have the mismatches as much as we've had in the past. And also those teams like Georgia and Japan who have got that chance of knocking over a Tier 1 team. Obviously they've been the topper, the better Tier 2 teams, and probably Fiji, etc., etc. It means that they get a chance of doing that by having those turnarounds. So yeah, as I said, well done to World Rugby. Definitely an improvement on 2015, and it's going in the right direction. So please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can always follow me on Twitter at DrivingMaul for a good chat as well. I'm always up for good rugby chat. Let me know your thoughts below, and look out for future videos.